Hi, students. Dr. Madewell here, and we're going to talk about a very important aspect of your life as an undergrad and as a graduate student and as a young professional or a new professional in the field. I want to share my screen with you. I'm going to talk about what goes in an abstract. You will be making 3 different abstracts this semester. One for your demographics report, one for your independent samples t-test, and one for your correlation. Now, in October, you might be creating and editing your own abstract to go to a conference. What you're doing in this class is designed to help you go to a conference or to get your research published in a journal. So these rules tentatively apply. I'll tell you about them and give you some resources. So let's talk about what goes in an abstract. And here's our agenda. I'll go over a sample abstract from one that I've written. We're going to go over what are the main components that go in an abstract, the tedious word limit. I want you to work on developing your own. Think about going to present at a conference, and then obviously email me any questions. Let's look at this example abstract. First off, there's always on that first title page, when you see an abstract in a journal, you're going to see the name of the journal. So this is Published in Violence and Victims. There's a title of the article. Okay, this title of the article, usually when you write a title, it needs to be around 15 words or less. Each conference, each journal will have different criteria, so you always want to check that. The development of the scale of protective factors, resilience in a violent trauma sample. That's a lot of words. But it's explaining, it's making the scale of protective factors, it's evaluating resilience in a violent trauma sample. So all of those words add to the story. They explain what this whole article is about. Writing your title and your abstract, I usually do that at the very end of my project. For this summer, this term, you're going to be writing 3 different abstracts when we're in a statistics class and I'm telling you about data that was already collected and we're using archived data. So some of this will be already written for you. Next, we usually have our authors and university affiliations. And then we get to the beloved abstract. Look how nice and tidy this is. Let's zoom in and let's read it. The very first sentence, this research developed the scale of protective factors. And now it's spelled out. Now we have an acronym. We could use that acronym the rest of the paper. To measure protective factors contributing to resilience. So that's every word in that sentence is needed. It can't be cut really any further. We investigated the factor structure of 35 items. After exploratory factor analysis, we subjected 25 items representing 2 social interpersonal and 2 cognitive individual factors to confirmatory factor analysis. Now, this abstract is talking about how we made the scale of protective factors. It's probably not the best example. I just picked the first one in my drive here. But what it's doing is telling you what is the purpose of this study. What's the problem? There are a lot of research tools measuring resilience, but this one was designed to look at what protective factors could people have to help them overcome stress and trauma. Okay. So when we have our first and second sentence, typically in our abstract, we have to fit everything in. What is the problem? Why was our study needed? And usually fit that in 1 or 2 sentences. Really short and sweet. Okay. Third, we need to start going over the method. The sample consisted of 942 college students from 3 studies and 2 institutions. It does not say that this data was collected at OSU or at Southeastern. We just know from 2 institutions. So we're keeping, by this being vague, we're keeping the sample participants' identity obscured. So that's our third sentence explaining our sample. Our fourth sentence should explain that it was IRB approved. How was the data collected? What research tools did you use? Let's see, to examine the diagnostic function of the SPF, we used clinical criteria to identify a subsample of participants who had experienced violent trauma and scored low, moderate, or high on an established resilience scale. So we have an established resilience scale and the new scale. And we know that participants reported some kind of violent trauma and scored low, moderate, or high. Results would be the fifth sentence. Detail the statistical analyses. Results showed the low resilient group scored significantly lower on all subscales of the SPF, with marked differences in prioritizing and planning behavior. There's a weird H right there. And then our sixth sentence. If you have time, fit those conclusions in, or what are implications for this research in clinical settings are discussed. And then at the bottom, we have keywords. When writing an abstract or evaluating this, there probably could be some better ways to say things. That's okay. And maybe you have to cut something that you just really need to say, but your journal or conference needs your abstract to be shorter. Okay, so pick your words carefully. Okay. When we look at word count, usually an abstract should summarize your entire study. So maybe you work on a research project for an entire year and you need to summarize it in about 250 words or less. Always make sure to check the conference or journal website for abstract criteria. You can download this website and you can go to the Southwestern Psychological Association. That's what we usually go to in our part of the world. It's not, the conferences are usually around the area. This last year in 2026, the conference was in Frisco, Texas. So usually these conferences are drivable and we don't need to fly. But that depends. For the Southwestern Psychological Association, because it is for students, it's geared for students to get practice presenting their research, they do allow a 500-word abstract. Makes it a lot easier. And then you can work on practicing being more concise. When you develop your own abstract, and you're going to be doing that 3 times this term, you're going to start out with your theory or your purpose statement. So here's just an example. Based on resilience theory from Dr. Maston in 2014, emerging adults who grew up experiencing stress and trauma are better prepared for adult trauma since they've developed coping strategies such as social support and social skills. And there's another. Maybe you include that as your opening sentence. Now, this sentence has Maston and Ponce Garcia, 2 citations. Typically, in an abstract, we don't have in-text citations. So if that was your sentence, you could just cut those 2 citations, but know where you got them from. Okay? You might have one other sentence explaining what kind of stress and trauma your study is going to focus on. Next, you want a sentence about your method. We have a sample of 60 emerging adults who reported growing up in a divorced household were surveyed. They completed an IRB-approved study pertaining to stress, trauma, and resilience. Okay, this might be what your abstract looks like. We did this today in class. This example. Next, you want a sentence or 2 on your results. Explain if you're writing a demographics report. That means you're just going to have your frequencies and percentages. You're not going to really draw any conclusions. Your results might be a t-test where you're comparing, say, men versus women, or Southeastern students to OSU students. Okay. And ANOVA, where you're comparing 3 or more groups. Oop, I have a typo right there. Or a correlational analysis. Next, spend a little time working on your discussion. Explain why these findings are important in relation to your past research. How do your findings relate to what Dr. Maston or Dr. Ponce Garcia has found in their research? And try to give one key takeaway if you have the word count. Okay. Like I said, try to get it in 250 words or less. That is what is required for this class this semester. I do want y'all to spend a little time thinking about, do you want to go to a local conference, such as the Oklahoma Psychological Society conference? It's usually at UCO. They don't have their 2027 information yet, but go to their website. This is a link. You might want to go to a regional conference, the one I just mentioned, the Southwestern Psychological Association conference in SWAPA. It's every spring around Easter. And it could be from Tennessee to New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, somewhere in that area. Okay. Big group of a big area, all in our region. Or you could go to a national conference. I really recommend the Association for Psychological Science. You can see that this next year it's going to be in Seattle, Washington. That would be nice. And it was in Barcelona, Spain, this previous year. Click on each of these and explore. Think about where you want to go and where you'd like to present your research. If you have questions, email me. Email Student Support Services. If I am just not making sense to you, email them. Get set up for tutoring, or email the Statistics and APA tutor that's affiliated with our course. I sure appreciate you. I wanted to make this short and sweet. But work on writing your abstract. It's going to be clunky your very first time because you're talking about archive data. So you're going to say, utilizing archive data, how many people did you focus on? Okay, tell me how many people you focused on and what variables you focused on. All right, you're going to be working on a demographics report abstract, a t-test, and a correlation this semester. I can't wait to read them. Talk to you soon.